to be planned at least over a year, perhaps more, pointing out as a for instance that you would have to have pilots who would be willing, someone who could control an aircraft like that, and would be willing to give his life or her life to be able to get up there and pull off something like this. And it's because an American pilot certainly would not do any such thing. I mean, they would do something else other than be able to give in to somebody with a gun or a knife. And how'd they get a gun or a knife on board anyway?
And we believe that was actually, from all indications, that was United Airlines Flight 175, the second plane to crash into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 65 people were on board that plane, as you saw it disintegrate before your eyes there in that video.
Look at this. This video is, again, I've seen the most appalling news video today that I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen some pretty horrific stuff, and this it just leaves me speechless. I really don't know what to say when you see that. And look at this video, this home video from the ground.
We know that Mayor Rudolph Giuliani in New York has been trying to get his arms around the situation, as we have as well. As far as the counts, everybody seems to gravitate towards a number to put this in some sort of perspective in your mind as to the gravity of the situation. And Mayor Giuliani said 2,100 people have either been killed or injured. Can't decipher between whether they were killed or injured, but 2,100 is the number he's putting out, as well as an extra 1,500, which he calls walking wounded, which are actually taken across the harbor to be treated. People who are, if you want to give them a name, or collateral damage on the ground near the area where the building collapsed several hours after or at least within 2 hours after the initial plane crash.
Look at the timing of this. Here are two 110-story towers. They house, at any given time, probably at the peak of the business day, they house 50,000 people inside. And this is what's happening. This video we showed you just a moment ago is incredible. This is all of that concrete dust and debris coming down. We think this is a doctor who shot this. At one point he asks one of the firemen there if he can, he says, let me have can I have a toot off of that, your breathing apparatus. The air is so thick with dust and dirt, you can't get any oxygen.
Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Oxygen. Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks.
That seemed to confirm there, Mike, that he was a doctor actually looking to help anybody that he could. What is so remarkable when you see that video is how quiet it is.
I was thinking the very same thing. It is eerily quiet, except for that strange sort of, I don't know what that sound was exactly.
I don't either.
It almost sounds a little bit like the traffic lights where they, for blind people, where they're able to get across, those whose sight is impaired are able to get across crosswalks.
Sounds like a lot of the personal alarms that firefighters wear as well.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's exactly what it was. It has that sort of weird, that very unusual sound. This has been a day in which, as we try to follow this story and put it together for you, the twists and turns have taken us for quite a ride since this began just a little before 9 o'clock this morning. Some of the information that has come back to us is that we were under the impression early on, the wire surfaces were certainly under the impression early on, that the aircraft that had crashed into the towers were both American Airlines planes. And now we knew from eyewitnesses that we've gotten the information that the aircraft that crashed into the side of the Pentagon was in fact an American Airlines plane that had taken off from Dulles Airport.
On its way to Los Angeles, 64 people on board, including Barbara Olson, we've reported, who is a key Republican strategist, also a novelist, a frequent guest on Fox Morning News here at our building as well, married to Ted Olson, the Solicitor General. very well-known, very well-connected couple in the Washington area. And she was on board that American Airlines Flight 77 bound for Los Angeles. We had reported, Mike, and it bears repeating, truly heartbreaking story that from indications from the family that Barbara Olson was booked on the flight yesterday to go out to Los Angeles, but wanted to wake up this morning and share breakfast with her husband because it's his birthday. And she actually, from family accounts, called her husband twice on the cell phone, indicating what was going on during the hijacking before she crashed into the Pentagon.
And we will get more information on that to you as soon as it's made available to us. Let's check in now with Paul Wagner, who is out on the streets of Washington, D.C. Paul, how's it going out there?
Well, Mike, it's very calm down here in downtown right now. We're at Connecticut and K near Farragut Square. Much more calm than it was very earlier today when all we did was hear the wail of sirens up and down the streets. But what I do want to tell you about is an interview that photographer Nelson Jones and myself got several hours ago with a man named Reuben Pemberton. He was on 395 northbound heading towards the 14th Street Bridge, leaving his workplace, heading back into the city when he saw the jet hit the Pentagon. Let's go to that interview now.
We're perpendicular to the Pentagon.
Northbound,
stopped in
coming
traffic.
into the city?
Stopped in traffic, northbound.
So traffic
bumper to bumper traffic, yeah.
What'd you see there?
I was on the phone and I heard a plane like fly over really low, like a jet. Turned to the right and it slammed into the Pentagon. Didn't really get a really good look at it, but trust me, it was a plane. It slammed right into the like west side of the Pentagon.
What'd you do then?
After that, freaked out, looked at other people in their cars. Everyone is in disbelief. And then I pull over a little bit, and I, beep my horn, like jamming through on the shoulder. And I get out of the car, and I look up, and I'm looking at the thing, the Pentagon's on fire. And I look over to the left, and here comes another plane. It had 4 propellers, big gray plane, and it's coming up. I know the pattern for national. It's not the pattern. It was coming up around the corner like this, and then it come up, and then went up like this, like it was going to bomb right into the Pentagon. And I'm screaming to people, look, 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 look. And everyone in the car is just like, and then next thing you know, it goes down through the smoke, and it just zoomed off.
Really?
Yeah, it was wild.
Where did it go after that?
I don't know. I mean, ask the pilot.
That's stunning.
Yeah, it was a mess, man. But then at the same time, all this stuff, and maybe this is why, like bricks and shit falling down on the highway, bricks and stuff. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. No, it's messed up.
Tell me what kind
That
of
is
Reuben Pemberton. Reuben Pemberton.
I don't know. It sounded like a jet.
Several
though.
hours ago.
I mean, like I've heard.
Found him in the
jets were
downtown
hijacked.
area.
It sounded like a jet.
And
the second.
I can tell you that many folks down here now in this area are still stunned by what has happened. People just walking around talking about how this is just unbelievable, about what's happened not only here in the Washington area but up in New York. A couple of other things I can share with you. D.C. Police Chief Charles Ramsey was in the Special Operations Center for several hours this morning, and then came out and spoke with Fox 5, telling us that he had placed his police department on emergency heightened state of alert. The police department working under emergency conditions, all officers expected to work and to work 12-hour shifts. While we've been down here for a few hours, we have seen the D.C. National Guard roll through here. They came through in their Humvees with military police insignias on the side of it, heading down K Street, presumably towards the Special Operations Division of the D.C. Police in order to get their orders. But again, Mike and Brian, very calm down here now. Not much traffic, and we're not hearing the wail of sirens that we did earlier today.
All right, Paul Wagner live.
Thank you, Paul. We actually had another guest that was here in our studio just a little bit earlier, Aziz El Halou, who was driving on 395 and saw the crash. He said that it appeared to him that the aircraft, he flies private planes, he said it appeared that the aircraft headed into the Pentagon, leveled off and went directly into it. He said it almost sounded as though the engines were being gunned as the thing went into there, and which is a terrifying, terrifying thought. He said that people stopped right in the middle of the highway, put their vehicles in park, and just got out and just were in total disbelief and shock at what they were seeing.
And as folks are trying to put this together in their minds, we've heard from numerous aviation sources that say that there is no United States pilot that would crash a plane into the Pentagon or the World Trade Centers or direct itself towards Camp David either, and that there's no indication from anybody in the aviation industry at this point that an American pilot would be at the controls and actually take that plane into these type situations.
Until we hear from the president at 9 o'clock, we're still going to be bringing you a lot of the reaction that's taking place. One bit of reaction from the former president, the former President Clinton, saying that he thinks that all Americans, he urges all Americans to stand behind President Bush in this time and to give him all the support that he can possibly use. And NATO is condemning what it calls the mindless slaughter of so many innocent civilians in today's terror strikes against the United States, saying the U.S. can count on their support in an intensified war against terrorism.
Well, it looks like we're in the bullseye of this. Obviously, there is a ripple effect. Several U.S. embassies in the Middle East right now are closed indefinitely. State Department's urging embassies worldwide to take necessary security precautions. Embassies in Yemen, Kuwait, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates announced that as of tomorrow they are closing indefinitely. Embassy in Saudi Arabia will, however, remain open. And Americans in Egypt are being urged to keep travel to a minimum and avoid public places and large gatherings. And the American Embassy in Japan won't be open tomorrow as well.
The video you're looking at now was shot by Skyfox this afternoon. It gives you, in some of the wider shots there, it gives you some sort of an idea as to how powerful that crash was when that 757, we believe it was, crashed into the side of the Pentagon there. And we see that it is remarkable that anyone would have survived that. There are any number of folks who are hospitalized, being treated right now. Actually, that's a shot to show you how close it is to Arlington National Cemetery. That's the Tomb of the Unknowns there, and some of the soldiers that are there. This is raw video you're looking at, by the way. This is unedited video that has come from Skyfox that we got from earlier today.
I'd like to know what exactly is going on right now at the Pentagon. Bob Barnard has been there most of the afternoon. Bob, we're getting initial reports from law enforcement agency sources, or at least individuals who are trying to put a tally on what's going on there at the Pentagon, that possibly 100 casualties. Can't decipher between those that are fatal and those are injured in surgery even at the moment. You have any ideas?
No, and we just heard from the Defense Secretary Don Rumsfeld, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, inside the building, Hugh Shelton. They're not going to put numbers on it, really, frankly, because the part of the building behind me that was struck by this commercial jetliner is an area that had just recently been rehabilitated. And they, frankly, as we've reported this afternoon, don't know how many people were in these offices. So they're not going to speculate on numbers, at least not officially and not to us. But despite this, the officials, in particular Secretary Rumsfeld, said the Pentagon is functioning and will be open for business tomorrow. Of course, this is, I've heard it called the largest office building in the world, and so only a portion of this building has been destroyed, so there will be people working tomorrow. Hugh Shelton, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said this was a barbaric act of terrorism carried out by fanatics. Virginia Senator John Warner said this was the most tragic hour in American history. And just a short time ago, we had an updated briefing from a Navy Pentagon spokesman, Rear Admiral Craig Quigley. Here's what he had to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of issues that Ms. Clark addressed a few minutes ago, we didn't have good answers for. We do have a couple of them now. All of the service secretaries and all of the service chiefs are accounted for. Also, all military installations around the world are at Force Protection Condition Delta. D as in Delta. That's as high as it goes. Normally that is imposed on a local basis, but given the magnitude of the attacks today, it was directed worldwide.
And we're back looking at a live picture here. You see the firefighting efforts are continuing, and pretty vivid now that the sun has gone down, at least not shining directly on the Pentagon. Live pictures, the west side of the Pentagon, flames still burning here near the area where the American Airlines jetliner crashed into the building this morning. And as we've been reporting, Brian and Mike, the urban search and rescue teams from Fairfax County and Montgomery County, Virginia and Maryland involved in this effort, they will not be going into the building, onto these floors until the fire has been put out totally. And I mentioned earlier that I happened to be out in Oklahoma City the night of the bombing there in April 1995. And I do remember that a rainstorm came through. It poured rain that first night. That's something they will not have to contend with here. The weather is just fine for overnight operations, and they are getting ready with generators and that kind of power to light up this building as darkness falls here. Hasn't quite yet, but they're in the shadow now and trying to get the flames under control. They're now burning. Those flames there are a lot closer to the impact area than the ones we saw 45 minutes to an hour ago. So the effort continues. We're not seeing water poured on this building at this hour. The shots, exclusive shots from Skyfox, that we showed you a short time ago, from about 3-4 hours ago, they were putting water on the fire. But those firefighting efforts have ceased for now, and they are just contending with the flare-ups and hoping that they can get this fire under control, because as soon as they can, they'll send in the dogs and the other teams to go try to find perhaps some living among the ruins behind me, and of course begin the recovery effort to get the bodies out.
All right, Bob Barnard, live at the Pentagon. Thank you for that. You know, Mike, what will be interesting to watch with all the eyes across the world focused really on us and in New York City is the subtext of what's going on. As information comes in bits and drabs, you can sort of feel some of the sub-messages that the United States is sending to the United States.
Here we go to the White House and
every American citizen. We will not tolerate such acts. We will expend every effort and devote all the necessary resources to bring the people responsible for the
against every technique. It is not possible to give guarantees. The people who work in...
Now is the time for us to come together as a nation to offer our support, our prayers for victims and for their families, for the rescue workers, for law enforcement officials, for every one of us that has been changed forever by this horrible tragedy. The following is a summary of the known facts surrounding today's incidents. American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175 departed Boston for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 departed Washington Dulles for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 departed Newark for San Francisco, was hijacked and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Crime scenes have been established by the federal authorities in New York, in Washington, D.C. area, in Pittsburgh, in Boston, and in Newark. The full resources of the Department of Justice, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the U.S. Attorney's offices, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Bureau of Prisons, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Office of Justice Programs are being deployed to investigate these crimes and to assist survivors and victim families. Thousands of FBI agents in all of the field offices across the country and in the international Legat offices, assisted by personnel from other Department of Justice agencies, are cooperating in this investigation. The FBI has established a website where people can report any information about these crimes. That address is www.ifccfbi.gov. That address again, www.ifccfbi.gov. Individuals can report any information they know about these crimes to that website. It takes courage for individuals to come forward in situations like this, and I urge anyone with information that may be useful and helpful to authorities to use this opportunity. The Office of Victims of Crime has established a toll-free 800 number for family and friends of victims. They can call 800-331-0075 to leave contact information for a future time when more information is available, to find out information about a victim, or to find out information about the rights of victims and the services available to victim survivors and victim families. The determination of these terrorists will not deter the determination of the American people. We are survivors, and freedom is a survivor. A free American people will not be intimidated, nor will we be defeated. We will find the people responsible for these cowardly acts, and justice will be done. Tommy.
Every single American lost something today. And every one of us at this time expresses our deepest sympathy to the victims of today's tragedies and their families. It is now our mission to begin the healing from this tragedy. From the moment that we learned of these attacks, the Department of Health and Human Services has begun readying teams and resources to be sent to New York City and the Washington area to meet any needs of state and local officials. So far, we have sent 4 disaster medical teams to New York City, and 3 of these disaster medical teams to the Washington, Northern Virginia, Baltimore area. These medical teams each consist of about 35 physicians, nurses, and emergency medical technicians. They are all trained to deal with traumatic injuries and other emergency needs. We've also sent 4 disaster mortuary operational response teams to New York and 3 to the greater Washington area. We're also in the process of shipping a great deal of emergency medical supplies to New York City with the help of the Centers for Disease Control. In short,
safety agencies at the federal, state.
There's resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort from the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that it's been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
Tommy Thompson speaking, the Interior Secretary, preceded by John Ashcroft, who has called for certainly calling it an assault on the security of our nation, an assault on the freedom of every American, those acts that have taken place this day, and asking those who may have any information at all about what took place and if they can help in the investigation to contact the website www.ifcc.fbi.gov. Those who are looking for information on victims can call 1-800-331-0075. They can leave a message to try and find out information on that, and they will get back to you.
And one of the things that Mr. Thompson mentioned is that 6,000 health officials have been activated to help cope with the loss that a lot of people are feeling, the impact that a lot of people are feeling. I would imagine one of those 6,000, if not included in that number, should be is D.C. Department of Mental Health Representative Martha Nisley, who joins us now on the phone. Ms. Knisley, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us the most important thing that people should know when it comes to sort of trying to get your arms around coping with this kind of loss? As it was mentioned in that press conference we just heard, all of us have lost something in this.
I think the most important thing that we can be doing right now with each other is to keep talking, particularly to our children who undoubtedly have a great deal of fear. This is such an unknown to them. We need to make sure that all of us as parents and family members are gathering together, talking together, and making sure that our children can feel as safe and as comforted as possible.
With such an impact on our community, there are going to be so many people out there that are touched, maybe not directly, but indirectly by their neighbors or friends or coworkers that have lost in this tragedy. What do you recommend those people do?
I recommend that we reach out, again, as families and as neighbors. I think it's true of everyone. I know people who know people who worked either in the Trade Center or the Pentagon, to make sure that they know that we're there, that we're available, that we need to come together in our local communities and in our families and reach out and show support. And people are going to need us for a long time, not just tonight, but for a long time. This tragedy is going to be with us the rest of our lives. And we need to come together in our communities, again, reaching out, making sure that we're talking. We can't bury this. We need to be helping each other as much as we possibly can.
All right, Martha Knisley with the D.C. Department of Mental Health. We thank you for that.
Here's a congressional briefing. Let's join it in progress. Again, we seem to be having some trouble with audio here. Hopefully we'll get this cleared up very quickly and be able to find out what's going on. They are working through the issues that they have at the microphones there.
The majority of those members of Congress were whisked away about 75 miles west of Washington as an emergency action plan went into place. They were whisked out of the area to a safe, secure facility to make sure that they were not in harm's way. I think we have the audio now. Let's go ahead and take a listen in.
House and Senate stand strongly united behind the President and will work together to ensure that the full resources of the government are brought to bear in these efforts. Our heartfelt thoughts and our fervent prayers are with the injured and the families of those who have been lost. We know, as a nation, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We'd ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you.
So, brief remarks from the political leadership, both Republican and Democrat.
There we have the remarks of those who, as we pointed out just a moment ago, were whisked away at the beginning of all of this. Those congressional leaders who they wanted to make sure were protected. We didn't know exactly what we were up against. The United States taking a number of blows today to our freedom, certainly to the lives of Americans, perhaps, and certainly, I should say, to our security, about how safe we feel in our country.
And you hear various remarks from various congressmen, senators, and representatives as well. And you get a wide range of emotions from them as well. You hear from Senator McCain that this is an act of war.
Very interesting, too, that the one thing our enemies in the past in the history of this country have always underestimated is the resolve of the American people, that we certainly can fight with each other like a family. The Congress, with its Democrats and its Republicans and the variations of those two parties going on in Congress and slugging it out with the president and that sort of thing. It does not mean that we don't stand together. We certainly do. And in a time like this, as you could see, all of those individuals were certainly trying to get that message out very clearly, that we stand behind our president, we stand behind our country, and we will certainly work our way through this and see that those who are responsible are addressed and held accountable.
There is no one side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle in this time.
Not in a situation like this, not at all. This is a day in which we don't know how many Americans have lost their lives. The tally is still being put together. One person has indicated they think that it could be, I believe it may have actually been Senator McCain, who indicated that it could be a tragedy even worse than that, an attack with casualties even worse than those of Pearl Harbor.
A second Pearl Harbor. 2,400 people were lost in Pearl Harbor. So that gives you an indication of the gravity of Pearl Harbor and how this matches up as well.
What is it, 2,200 we're talking about in New York, 1,500 walking wounded, plus those who may have lost their lives here in our area.
So the counting will begin, I'm sure. Yes. You know, one thing that Attorney General John Ashcroft mentioned was a free American people will not be intimidated or defeated. And I had mentioned to you a little bit earlier, it's interesting to watch the subtext of this as the information slowly comes in and people begin to make their remarks, public officials and the like, that we are sending a message to everyone who is watching us across the globe that we will not be defeated, that we take this to heart, and that we will find those and punish those. And one indication of that is that according to the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, the Pentagon is going to be open for business tomorrow, at least at the highest levels, which goes to show you that despite the tragedy and the enormity of the situation today down at the Pentagon, the highest levels of the workers down there will be back at work tomorrow, will not be defeated.
Members of Congress singing now, God Bless America, their way of showing solidarity behind our country, behind those who have had incredible losses today. And talking about our resolve to see this through and to move on as a country, as a nation, as a people.
God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
That is the shock, isn't it? We have been attacked in our own home.
We have been.
This is a nation that has seen any number of attacks, but not on our shores and not like this. Pearl Harbor, as we talked about earlier, certainly wasn't part of the continental United States, although obviously it was against our government. And now we are attacked by an enemy who is faceless. We don't know exactly who it is. We've got a pretty good idea who it is, but we don't know for sure. And how do you begin to address that?
Retired General Walt Cross joins us now on the phone to talk a little bit about what we've seen unfold here. Maybe we can start with the Pentagon, sir, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm prepared to talk about the flights and the flight tracks that took place earlier today.
Well, let's talk about specifically the one that took place as the aircraft was headed out toward Los Angeles, or San Francisco, I believe it was, and ended up crashing in Pennsylvania. Is there any way in which we couldn't have seen? Did we see that there was some movement with that aircraft, do you think, that said this might be a danger to someone, and that's why it was crashed in Pennsylvania?
That flight was indeed scheduled to go from Newark to San Francisco, had a normal flight profile until it got over Cleveland. And there it appeared that the airplane took a hard turn to the south and then a turn immediately headed directly towards Washington, D.C., and we don't know what went on in the cockpit, but something occurred that caused the airplane to crash about 100 miles south of Pittsburgh, starting from 35,000 feet and ending impacting on the ground.
Do you have an indication from the information you've gathered at how quickly this took place from when it was a normal flight pattern until when it wasn't a normal flight pattern and obviously something was terribly wrong?
No, we don't. We know that the flight at about 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time appears to have made its first hard turn off its normal flight path, and at about 9:30 it actually filed a in-flight flight plan to go into Washington, D.C., and then it crashed shortly thereafter. But that's all that we do know from the sketchy information that we have.
Can we talk about American Airlines Flight 11?
Yes.
This was an interesting path here, too, because we certainly couldn't have imagined that this aircraft could have taken off and then be headed right for one of the tallest buildings in our country.
Yes, well, actually what happened there was the flight took off from Boston's Logan Airport on a normal profile, proceeding out over Massachusetts, and shortly after it passed Albany, New York at flight level 290, 29,000 feet, it took a hard left turn due south, headed almost right down the Hudson River, increased to 500 knots, and then when it got in the New York area, it slowed down to about 300 knots and then impacted in the World Trade Center. That was the first of the two planes. The second one also departed from Boston's Logan Airport, United Flight 175. That took a completely different flight path, by the way. It took off to the southwest, flew out over Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, before circling back in from the west and impacting the second World Trade Tower.
And when you look at American Airlines Flight 77, which is the last of the four that we haven't spoken about yet, the one that crashed into the Pentagon, headed from Washington, Dulles, to Los Angeles, LAX, I don't know the schematics of the runways, but I know the location of Dulles and I know the location of the Pentagon, and they're exact opposite directions from Los Angeles. Do you have an idea of whether or not they knew right from the get-go that something was wrong?
Probably not right from the start. There was an elapsed time from takeoff until impact at the Pentagon of 24 minutes, so they probably made their way a good ways out from Dulles before actually coming back towards the Pentagon. We do not have the flight track on that at this time. We're still building it.
We know that on this end, that at one point there were fighter planes that were scrambled. We've heard that they were Air National Guard, perhaps they were Air Force jets from Andrews. Was that because, and we're also hearing, by the way, that there was an airplane that was headed back to Washington, as you pointed out. There's no chance that the military aircraft actually encountered that jet, is there?
I have no idea about any of the interactions of the military airplanes with the commercial planes.
Okay. The military aircraft that were scrambled in this area, after we had heard this report, that one was that perhaps the target might be Camp David. The other was that another airplane would be headed for the Pentagon. Any word on that?
No, you have more information than I have on that subject.
I'm not sure that ours is that accurate, Walt, but we're working on the best that we have at this point. We thank you very much for being with us and giving us that information. You've certainly illuminated a lot of the part of the story that we did not know up to this point.
Thank you. Happy to help.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. You know, Secretary O'Neill, who is keeping an eye on the monetary situation in this country, a lot of people might think that this is a weak time in our nation because of the economy and the state of the economy that we're in. Says that the financial markets are very strong and that this really hasn't had an immediate impact on the markets, at least too much so.
One of the things that we heard earlier today was a call all across this country for people to go to their local churches and to send up prayers for those who have been killed, those who had been injured, and certainly for the future and the health of our country. Take a look at some of this video taken tonight at one of the churches here locally where people got together and prayed. We're looking at the beginning of this now. Sending National Presbyterian Church, in which they are sending up prayers. That's Pastor Barnes there, who is addressing his congregation.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
The Lord's Prayer at National Presbyterian Church tonight, one of the many churches across our country tonight holding services, people gathering to send up prayers for those who have lost their lives, who have been injured, and certainly for the health, safety, and future of our country.
We're looking at video now of the Pentagon where estimates are about 100 or so at this point as far as either deceased or injured. Can't differentiate between the two in that figure, but we can tell you that's the only figure that we have right now from law enforcement officials. However, up in New York, we are now getting word from the firefighters union that of the first 400 firefighters who reached the scene of the World Trade Center attack today, as many as half may be dead. That estimate is coming from a vice president within the New York City Firefighters Union. He says that entire companies are missing at this point in New York and unable to make any contact with anybody in those companies.
As we pointed out earlier, here we had the first airplane crashing in. You're seeing the second right there in front of your eyes. As the first incident happened, those fire companies were dispatched. They were sent into the buildings. The elevators stopped working immediately, of course. So they were having to go up through the stairwells to try to get up there, and they were trapped inside. And then later, not very long after both of those crashes took place, the buildings themselves came tumbling down.
We heard from eyewitnesses up there in New York about just the terrible conditions that they had to fight when they got there. We heard of people in wheelchairs that were completely stuck on floors, could not escape. We heard about the sprinklers going off in the firewells up in New York. This is obviously video of the Pentagon here.
Can you hear me?
And slippery conditions that the firefighters are facing there.
Right. And then we saw that video that was from the ground level, and you see a little bit of it right there. This looks like black and white video. This is a color camera that's taking a picture of people who are covered in soot and dust and dirt that came from the pieces of that building as it tumbled down. This looks like a war zone, right? Just unbelievable video. This is New York City, ladies and gentlemen. Manhattan. What's left of the World Trade Center.
Let's bring it a little closer to home now. Let's go down to Will Thomas, downtown Washington, D.C. He's been working the beat down there for us, talking about many issues, including blood donations and the like. Will, what do you have for us?
Well, let me first tell you where we are. This is K and Connecticut Avenue. Myself and Paul Wagner have been broadcasting live from here all morning, all afternoon, kind of our own Fox 5 mini command center. It basically has been a good spot for us to hit various locations throughout the Washington, D.C. area. Let's take a look now. This is K Street. And what would appear to be possibly some kind of a motorcade. Usually the Special Operations Division, there are more cars coming, the Special Operations Division of the D.C. Police Department on L Street, they usually help coordinate that. Looks like that's about it right now, but I tell you, we're seeing a lot of situations like that. Just about an hour ago, we saw what looked to be a water tank being escorted through here, and earlier before that, we saw Maryland State Troopers escorting a Red Cross van with supplies for the nearby blood bank. We want to take you inside there in just a moment, but I can tell you, while we were there, and that is located on I Street near Connecticut, the Los Angeles Mayor, James Hahn, showed up. He was here in Washington, his first trip to Washington since being elected in June, and he wanted to do something. He tells us this really hits home. Here's the mayor.
It really does. We know there are many families in Los Angeles who were going to meet loved ones at the airport that they'll never see. You know, a lot of people who have relatives in New York who are still worried about what the outcome is going to be there. So I think the whole country is affected by this. But
absolutely. Now, he told us he was at a meeting at the Executive Office building when a staff member ran in and said, my God, they have hit the Pentagon. He was evacuated immediately along with other staff members, really the entire building. As you can see here, he was not the only one who showed up to donate blood. At least 100 people showed up to the I Street location, so many, in fact, several had to be turned away, simply too many. The Red Cross says you have several weeks to donate blood and still be a part of this. You can expect at least an hour wait when you do show up to give blood, but what they're asking is to consider signing on to the website, redcross.org. You can check to see whether or not you qualify to give blood before you actually go there, so you won't be turned away after waiting, and you won't have to actually call the blood centers because they are simply overwhelmed. Let me again point to this location where we are at K in Connecticut. Just about a block behind me, that's I Street, there is an area created, a perimeter basically around the White House and the Executive Office building. Traffic is not being allowed inside there. We're seeing very little auto traffic. As you've been hearing all afternoon and all evening long, we're in a state of emergency here in Washington, D.C. People are being asked not to drive unless they have to. This looks like the middle of the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning on a weekend. This doesn't look like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening on a weekday. All of the businesses shut down. I can tell you there are several crews working, including members of the D.C. Police Department. A few of them wanted to get bottled water, get a bite to eat. There is just nothing open. You really have to look hard and look far to find something in this downtown area. That is the latest from where we are in downtown Washington. Now back to you guys in the studio.
Well, Thomas, thanks very much. Brian Bolter, who's been sitting in with us here while Tracy was working on some other elements for our 10 o'clock newscast, is now down doing the same thing, working on some elements for our 10 o'clock newscast. And Tracy, as we were sitting here watching the Attorney General and watching the members of Congress talk about their resolve to see this issue through and to make our country strong, it reminded me that we have been on the air now for ever how many hours. It's 7:45. The president's going to speak in an hour and 15 minutes, and all of us are wondering exactly what it is that he can say that will take away our fear about what we're facing right now.
I think as the leader of this country, one of the things he's going to try to do tonight is probably to help us get on the path toward healing. I mean, it's early. We don't know the death toll yet. We don't know the number of injured yet, but we know what we've seen, and we know what kind of impact it's probably going to have on all of us. And so I think that, among other things, standing strong as a united nation, I think that he will also be helping us to get on the path of moving on with our lives.
We want to share some video with you. Again, you've seen it before, but it is just so compelling, and it's so, it takes you right into the belly of the beast, if you will. This is home video shot by an amateur, and as nearly as we can tell, this gentleman must be a doctor. He's showing some of that video. This is after one of the airplanes. The second airplane has crashed into the second tower. You see the debris coming down. And watch this debris take over. We'll stop talking if you can just absorb this moment. He's saying, I hope I live.
It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind the car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm going to have to go find people who need help. Because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Oxygen. Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen. If someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks.
Okay, this is that video that we've shown now. That's the third time I've seen it, Tracy, and I've got to tell you, it's as compelling as the first time I saw it. I just can't even imagine being in that kind of a situation, although you felt like you were there from watching that video?
You could hear him trying to breathe. The person who was shooting that amateur video for us sounded like a doctor. It sounded like he knew what he was talking about in terms of the respirators and oxygen and that sort of thing. But you could also hear people choking and gasping and coughing in the background. You can only imagine from all that debris that there's so much littering the air with every breath. It's polluted.
Brian commented earlier when he was sitting here looking at that video, he said he thought that, well, for one thing, that strange noise that we heard might be one of the alarms that was actually on the suits of the fire and rescue crews that were there. The other aspect of watching what was taking place there was to realize how quiet it was, how strangely quiet. I mean, New York City, you know New York City, it's always got horns and honking and sirens and that sort of thing. And at that moment, all you could hear were those strange alarms that were on the firemen's suits, that sort of chirping sound.
Which, if Brian was correct, then that would have suggested that they were out of time. But you're looking at video from another sort of angle of the same thing, just moments before that amateur video was shot of the commercial airliner just plowing into the second tower, just going up in smoke. It's hard to watch.
The eyes, all eyes were toward the sky anyway. They were watching the first. Look at this. It goes through the back and breaks through.
It doesn't even look real.
No.
It just doesn't.
No, this all looks like a Hollywood movie, but this is real life in the year 2001.
And we know so many emergency management personnel rushed to the scene, police officers, firefighters, maybe even 400 firefighters, of which now we are learning that perhaps 200, half of them are missing, and some of them might be presumed dead.
They said entire companies were gone, and certainly we understand that. Again, this is that video we saw just a moment ago from the ground level, where you see that debris raining down after the second aircraft hit the second tower.
And that is why so many of the emergency personnel are missing now, and some presumed dead, because they would have been the ones who rushed inside those buildings in the moments after the first plane and then the second plane came through, having no idea that there was so much structural damage done to the Twin Towers there that the buildings moments later would collapse on them, underneath them, around them, the walls just crumbling in.
The story that's worth telling again, it was our understanding that in the first bombing that took place in '93, that one of the reasons that the tower did not come down was because the bomb was at the center of the building in the parking garage, and in fact the structure is actually held up by the walls on the outside. Any number of stories. The Learning Channel has run stories about this particular thing and that particular phenomenon. So here we see two aircraft that are slammed into the side of both towers, breaking essentially that structural rigidity, and both of them came crashing down.
Whoever did plan this out, whoever is responsible for the carnage, for the destruction, you wonder how long they had been planning this out and how they would have been able to recruit so many people to take part in it, because those people were on a suicide mission.
Yes, they were. And again, as our terrorists experts have told us, probably working in cells where they really don't know which other group is out there working, and consequently they keep a high level of security among themselves and make it very, very difficult to penetrate and to find out what's going on.
And a similar scenario, you know, the story had two sides to it, one happening in New York, the other happening right here in Washington at the Pentagon. You can see right now exclusive pictures from Sky Fox of crews there trying the best that they can to first bring the flames and the smoke under control, so then they can get inside of that building with the rescue dogs, with the experts, to begin to dig through all of that debris and see if there's any chance that there's anyone alive inside the Pentagon, this section of the Pentagon. And then ultimately they have the horrible task of pulling out the bodies.
As shocked as this country was after the Oklahoma City bombing, we were just so stunned and amazed that such a horrible thing could happen on our shores. To have this sort of incredible timeline here, where we're now going into just about 8 o'clock, almost, oh golly, now we're looking at, what, 10 hours since or actually more than that at this point, 11 hours since all of this began. It is just stunning to think that all of that could have happened. I mean, 4 airliners coming out of the sky and within hours of one another. One of them, apparently, the last one that crashed in Pennsylvania, apparently headed back to a target either at Camp David or the Pentagon. We're not sure which it was. That did not make it. It veered from its course, headed from San Francisco, and went directly into the ground, according to eyewitnesses, there in Pennsylvania, just south and east of Pittsburgh.
And we don't really know what else was part of this plan that was not executed to its end today. There may have been other elements to this that we don't know about. It's such a tragedy, and I think because it all happened back to back so quickly, there was just no way for the U.S. to be on top of both situations at once, and unfortunately we're seeing the result of that right now.
So here in the district, it's worth repeating again that for all of the concerns that we had early on in all of this, people were so terrified and so taken aback by what had taken place earlier in this day that within hours after those crashes, and certainly after the Pentagon situation, we had reports of bombs going off in D.C. and packages being found and so forth and so on. We've been assured by the Chief of Police and by the Capitol Police that no such thing has actually taken place here, that the district has been left unscathed pretty much. The situation in the Pentagon, of course, is horrific and horrible. There's no question about that. But in the district itself, we've not had any incidents. And it's probably worth pointing out, Tracy, that here in the district, we've been getting ready now for months for what we thought was going to be a big problem with people who might perform terrorist acts right in our area. We were concerned that the folks who might be involved with the protests at the IMF World Bank meetings toward the end of the month would be doing something really horrible and terrible. We were getting fireproof uniforms for our police officers, bringing in other officers, 3,600 I believe was the number, from other jurisdictions to be able to help us deal with it. And lo and behold, here we have something that's so much bigger than we could have ever imagined a month earlier.
And now those meetings might not even take place. Mayor Anthony Williams making a formal request to have those meetings postponed, and understandably so. I mean, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia under states of emergency right now. We don't know what they're going to find once they go inside of the Pentagon, and how much damage is really done there, and how many casualties we're dealing with. So the meetings were set to begin at the end of the month, as you said, and so it's a very good chance right now that will not happen, that the city as well as our surrounding communities will remain focused on this and remain focused on getting life back to normal as much as we can after this horrible experience today.
Interesting that Bob Barnard was telling us earlier that even as the sun has now gone down, that in that area they are working hard to get those fires out. They're looking at daylight video, file video there now of the Pentagon, but that the crews, the Fairfax rescue crews and the Maryland rescue crews are still standing by with the dogs. They feel like that on a night like tonight that they will be able to, once they get everything tapped down pretty well like they need to have it, that they will be able to go in overnight, and they are ready to do that, to try and find those who may have survived this horrific act.
We have to be thankful that there's no rain tonight. There aren't high winds tonight, so that's going to help them, because weather is certainly an issue when you're going into a building that has that much structural damage. And the other thing is time is of the essence. If there are survivors in there, and we certainly hope that there are, you know, it could be a matter of hours, if they have that long, to go in there and find anyone and bring them out. But it did happen in Oklahoma City, as Bob Barnard, pointed out to us earlier. So we are hopeful tonight.
Yes, we are. The folks at Arlington Hospital are looking to see how their loved ones are doing. Bill Prasad is there. Most of the victims from the Pentagon plane crash have taken place. Tell us what's going on there, Bill.
Well, as you know, this hospital is very close to the Pentagon, only about 10 minutes drive time away, approximately 4 miles from the Pentagon. Exactly 37 people were brought here. Of those 37, 18 have been discharged. 8 are in intensive care. 4 of the 8 are still on ventilators. We have some pictures of some of those patients that were brought in earlier today. The first ambulance started arriving shortly after the plane crashed into the Pentagon. At the time, the hospital was in crisis mode. Additional personnel had been brought in. It's a scenario that these people had been training for. 50 doctors and more than 100 nurses were on hand to treat injuries that included broken bones, burns, bruises, and serious smoke inhalation. One man we spoke to is a civilian firefighter with the Department of Defense. He and a co-worker saw the plane as it zeroed in on the Pentagon.
I yelled at my partner, and we both started running. I ran directly north, and he ran out into the field a little bit. There was a flash, a horrific crunch. There was a fireball. When I felt the fire, that's when I dove on the ground and slid underneath the van and crawled all the way underneath the van.
Now, in spite of the burns that he suffered on his arms, he jumped right in and aided with the rescue efforts. Back here at the hospital now, it has quieted down considerably in the last couple of hours. As for giving blood, officials are saying, do not come here. You will want to contact your local Red Cross Center or the hospital that is closest to you. They are in definite need of blood. We are live at the Virginia Hospital Center. Bill Prasad, Fox 5 News.
All right, Bill, thanks so much for that update. You know, an odd twist here. I'm going to read this to you from the Associated Press. It's just now coming into our studios, Brian. And I should say Brian is
stepping in
with
for
us
Mr.
now.
Landis for a few minutes
For
so we can
Mike
get
for a
something
little
together for the 10 o'clock.
State police out of Baltimore telling us that they have arrested a Baltimore man who confessed to falsely reporting information about possible targets in Maryland for today's terrorist attacks. Police spokesperson Greg Shipley says that the 23-year-old man was arrested shortly after 7 p.m. tonight in his Baltimore home. He says the suspect will be charged with filing a false report that shifted a crime investigation. So I'm sure we'll be learning more about that. But that's an odd twist to this. Right now, they are continuing to try to bring the situation at the Pentagon under control. You can see it's quite a different scene now that the